Live everywhere on netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025. Time to get going once again. And on my own today, because it's Tuesday. So it feels like a Friday, I guess, is pretty much the way it's working out for me. Lots to catch up on and any number of really long reads. And I'm evaluating a couple of them. Some of the new ones, they seem like they seem like they're important. But it's difficult to... I guess it's difficult in the current environment to think that these issues, the issues that they cover, which would ordinarily be, I think, top shelf stories, they're esoteric. They deal with a weird, I don't know what. I mean, you'll see what I'm talking about in just a minute. But I don't know. In the grand scheme of things, they don't seem quite as important, even though they really are. And that's part of the weaponry that they use against everybody here, just give you just fire hose of bad news and government interference and things they shouldn't be involved in that they are because they want to control everything. And, and you have to make these decisions about whether or not they're worth your time. So I guess maybe we'll at least take note of some of the things that are happening on this front. And here's what I mean. There are a lot of other important stories, and we'll try and turn to them as quickly as possible. But I wanted to note a couple of these other weird things first, which include, let's see, everybody seems to be chatting about this one today, and I have started to skim the story, and I'm still not entirely clear what we're talking about here, but it's over in the New York Times, which of course automatically means that it's important. And it's, from some name brand reporters, Michael Schmidt and Michael C. Bender. And together they have put together this story, a Stephen Miller staffer. And everybody loves Stephen Miller.
Bald asshole.
I know it's not necessary to actually say that, but it's true. A Stephen Miller staffer, barely, like for 10 minutes, and tough talk inside Trump's latest attack on Harvard. And okay, so there's a whole section here, by the way, as it turns out, in the New York Times, a whole Harvard versus Trump section, because essentially what's happening here is Trump trying to make this thing happen, trying to make destroying Harvard happen. And I'm not sure why. There's been all sorts of various analyses trying to nail down the reason or several chief reasons, and it's not entirely clear, but the prevailing theories are basically about, again, trying to undermine expertise that isn't under their control or that doesn't always agree with them, a show of force, various other, motivations, possibly up to and including not admitting Donald Trump to Harvard as an undergraduate student, something like that. By the way, in the middle of all this, I thought it was a joke that I noticed this. This is not a part of the important story. Even this story, I'm not 100% sure how important it is. But Barron Trump is of age to be applying for admission to universities. And in the middle of this all-out assault on Harvard, he thought he'd apply to Harvard. And he didn't get in. And of course, they're pointing that, so they're discriminating against it. Well, your father's involved in an all-out battle to destroy the institution. Why would you want to be here, for one thing? But for another, that can be a consideration. If it can be a consideration that your father tries to give $10 million to build a building and will let you in, then it can be a consideration that your father's trying to destroy the place and it won't let you in. But not much reporting on that one, but I never doubled back to look because it's among the least important things in the whole grand scheme of things. So this one, though, a Stephen Miller staffer and tough talk inside Trump's latest attack on Harvard. If I understand this correctly, what it comes down to is a Harvard Law School student graduating like now, essentially, who was on the Harvard Law Review. And I don't know what happened because he's an editor on the Harvard Law Review. So what else do you want exactly? He must have encountered at some point what he felt because he's a conservative weirdo and very likely a bald
asshole.
Yeah, I don't know whether he has his hair or not, but eventually I think he'll be one. Must have encountered discussion among the editors at the Harvard Law Review, I'm sure over articles being selected for publication or next year's staff bringing new editors on as the old ones graduate, etc., just sort of renewing the organization as normal. And there were probably some discussions in which they said, well, what about this one, and this one? Well, this one's really highly qualified, that one's really highly qualified. I am a little bit concerned, somebody probably said at some point, about the demographics, the composition of the editorial board. Like, we've really underrepresented, XYZ minority. You name it. They're probably underrepresented it. And they probably talked about the relative advantages of having a more diverse editorial board. Versus this someone here is, more or less as qualified as that person, but we already have 18 white guys. Maybe we should add somebody of color at some point. And this is one of those Stephen Miller types who said, that's racial discrimination. Not really. What's racial discrimination is like, well, that guy's black, so we will not publish his article. Or that guy's white, so we will not publish. But that's exactly what you're saying. No. We're saying that it's a factor that's taken into account, and diversity of viewpoints and backgrounds is important to us, and we have limited space. But we're not prohibiting anybody white from ever publishing. We're just saying when it comes down to the choices between this guy who's good and that guy who's good, maybe we'll take that guy because that guy's got a little something extra to offer us, a background that we're not as familiar with, whether the board is not traditionally informed of in the way that they are traditionally pretty clued into the white guy lifestyle, probably, right? So what's not clear to me is what was the disappointment? What was the letdown? Why? Because this guy had more or less a pretty charmed life up to and including graduating from law school and applying for a job in the White House and getting it. Just getting it. I'm 25. I just graduated. Can I have a job? Yeah. White House. He's got it rough. So I don't know what his big beef is, but the allegations from the White House are that he applied to the White House and it was clear that he was going to use his position to try to further his complaint against Harvard, and that Harvard therefore retaliated against him by coming up with what they, I'm sure, would claim are bogus disciplinary charges against him. But as it turns out, the chronology doesn't work. But so what it now seems like they're doing is he works for Stephen Miller in the White House. Stephen Miller's helping conduct the big assault on Harvard. And this guy said, you know what, when I was at Harvard, they tried to discipline me because I, fought back against the racial discrimination against white men. And so they've decided to try to build a case out of this because a guy, I don't even know, experienced some mild disappointment at some point, even though he was elevated to the highest ranks of the editorship not the highest ranks, I guess, but among the top ranks of the editorship of the Harvard Law Review. Boo-hoo. So here's the story as it's presented. The Justice Department. What? The Justice Department quietly approached Harvard University last month with startling claims, even by the extraordinary standards of the Trump administration's months-long assault on the elite college. The department signaled that it was reviewing claims of discrimination against white men at the Harvard Law Review and accused the renowned publication of destroying evidence. Boo! Oh no, everybody hates it. You'll see where this is coming from. They hyperbolize just about everything. Well, can I have that letter back? You're destroying evidence. Not really. But accusing them of destroying evidence in an open investigation which, as it turns out, they didn't know about. The administration demanded that Harvard, quote, cease and desist, unquote, from interfering. So just sort of a little bit of non-lawyer lawyering at the Harvard Law Review. When I mean not at, I don't mean by them. I mean it's directed at them. Cease and desist. Aha, they have to do it because I've said the magic words. In a series of letters that have not been previously reported, the government also disclosed that it had a, quote, cooperating witness. It's this kid that they hired, and he told them their stories. Anyway, a cooperating witness inside the student-run journal. He wasn't inside it by the time they had him as a cooperating witness. He was just telling stories of what he thought happened when he was there. That witness now works in the White House under Stephen Miller, the architect of the administration's domestic policy agenda, Trump officials confirmed. The Law Review, by the way, independent of Harvard University. The allegations nonetheless deepened fears among Harvard officials that the administration appeared eager to escalate one of its civil investigations, which it shouldn't even have been conducting in the first place, into a criminal inquiry, underscoring how the university's problems with President Trump extend far beyond the loss of billions in federal funding. But the aggressive language in the letters from the Justice Department's two top civil rights lawyers appear to have overstated the allegations in pursuit of an additional way to punish Harvard. And in that way, the episode fits a broader trend in how the administration is wielding federal investigatory powers to impose its political agenda. From reshaping the economy, and that's an interesting way of putting it, wrecking. Yeah, I'm reshaping this bank. Just put all of the money in this bag and no one gets hurt. I'm reshaping the economy. To ramping up deportations, to punishing the nation's elite law firms and universities, Mr. Trump's government has repeatedly prized speed and shock value over the methodical steps typically taken to build a legal case, which is why they lose them all the time. The investigation of the Harvard Law Review offers a glimpse into the strategy. The Justice Department's not-so-subtle threats helped persuade the Law Review to agree to at least some of the government's demands, which were delivered in 3 letters within 10 days in May. He graduated, and he's already prosecuting the place that gave him the diploma. A detail not included in the correspondence: the Justice Department's cooperating witness had taken a job inside the White House. He wasn't a cooperating witness. He was a complaining coworker. While the White House has cast the witness as a whistleblower, his identity has been known to many of those involved in the matter. The witness is Daniel Wasserman, and identified as a government cooperator in 2 of the letters to Harvard University from the Justice Department last month, when he was still an editor at the Law Review. And other staff members at the Law Review have also known of his identity. In April, he had told classmates and others that he had applied to work for Mr. Miller, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy. The White House confirmed that Mr. Wasserman was offered a job on April 25th, the same day that accusations of discrimination at the Journal first surfaced in a conservative media report, and that his first day of work was going to be May 22nd. The letters were sent by the Justice Department to the university rather than to the Law Review, for some strange reason, were dated May 13th, May 21st, and May 23rd. All right? So he's offered a job on April 25th, starts work on May 22nd, and in the meantime, on the 13th, 21st, and 23rd of May, the last letter right after he starts there, they're sending threatening letters to Harvard University, which doesn't run the Law Review. Mr. Wasserman, who has a bachelor's degree from Yale, he is downtrodden, and a master's from the University of Cambridge, graduated from Harvard Law School on Wednesday. A senior administration official said that Mr. Wasserman's resume was on the White House's radar long before the Justice Department's investigation into the Law Review, and that his hiring was not connected to the government's inquiry. So it was, because the spokesperson has said it's not. Mr. Miller was not involved in the hiring and did not meet Mr. Wasserman until he started working in the White House, the official said. On Friday, Mr. Wasserman picked up the phone assigned to him at the White House when the reporter from the New York Times called the White House switchboard and asked to speak with him. No comment, Mr. Wasserman said, and quickly hung up. A Justice Department spokesman did not respond to a request for comment either. Legal experts said it was highly unusual Yes. For an administration, a presidential administration, to give a cooperating witness in an ongoing investigation a White House job. That is odd, don't you think? Inside the administration, some officials said the Justice Department might have additional evidence beyond what it had disclosed in its letters. Two administration officials familiar with the investigation said the department had been pursuing an allegation that law school students applying for editorial jobs at the Law Review were told directly of racial and gender hiring preferences. And as you heard it here, they have preferences. Mandates? No. Quotas? No. Preferences. Hiring preferences at a law review at the law school of Harvard University. We're going to destroy the whole thing, the whole Harvard. All right. Harrison Fields, a White House spokesman, praised Mr. Wasserman as a whistleblower and encouraged more students to speak out. This is where everything happens, all the hyperbole, Harvard is violating federal law with its discrimination. It isn't discrimination, and it's not violating federal law. And a student was brave enough to call them out on this. He was very brave, having already secured employment with the people who are levying the charges. Like, all right, that's super brave. Because of these actions, the Justice Department is investigating clear violations of the law, and maybe terrorism as well. Sure. Jonathan Swain, spokesman for Harvard, said the university was committed to following the law and emphasized that the school and the Law Review are two separate entities. Harvard Law School and Harvard University, both different entities themselves, really, do not control or operate the Harvard Law Review, including its membership or article selection decisions. Mr. Swain said in an emailed statement, the Law Review declined to comment. The Harvard Law Review is widely considered, naturally, I think, one of the nation's most prestigious and influential legal journals. The Law Review provides a training ground for future leaders, including former President Barack Obama, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, and former Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and its highly selective articles regularly shape legal arguments and court decisions. But the journal has emerged as a new pressure point in the administration's campaign against Harvard, which has so far refused demands to align its admissions policies, curriculum, and hiring practices with Mr. Trump's political agenda. And why would they? Mr. Trump and Harvard are two separate entities. I would add. I did add. The first public indication of the Trump administration had zeroed in on the Law Review came on April 28th, oddly, about 3 days after Wasserman was hired, but when the Departments of Education and Health and Human Services announced a civil rights investigation citing a news article that had appeared in the Washington Free Beacon 3 days earlier, the day he was offered a job. I don't think those two things have anything to do with it, but okay. The Free Beacon, a conservative media outlet, had published multiple private messages and internal documents from the Law Review that it said showed the journal was discriminating against white male authors. So interesting. This guy has now landed the job in the White House, and it begins his complaining sessions. I have proof they discriminated against white male authors. No, they may have preferred work from other authors, but one, you're exaggerating the claims, and two, what's your problem? You just got the job. But that's that doesn't apply, I don't think. Normally, you say, what's your beef if you have had this charmed life and now landed a job in the White House right out of the gate? But the answer is, the job I landed was come in and stir this pot, make this problem happen, give us this attack front on Harvard. So he began. The day he got the job and was sure everything was going to be okay, suddenly the Free Beacon has discovered that the Harvard Law Review is doing exactly what this guy says they were doing. Were they doing it? I don't know. Was he saying it? I guess so. Did he have a basis for it? I don't know. But that was the job. Stir the pot. The Free Beacon, a conservative media outlet, had published multiple private messages. And how did they get those? And internal documents from the Law Review that showed that the journal was discriminating against white male authors. Or at least they thought that those documents showed that. How'd they get the documents? Without, I don't think, spoiling this article, Wasserman. And that's a big part of the problem. The Free Beacon story also prompted a different kind of inquiry inside the Law Review, where editors looked for signs of a leak. How did they get all these internal documents and text messages? Their search revealed that Mr. Wasserman, amazingly enough, had downloaded tens of thousands of documents. Why? One might wonder. That, according to three people familiar with the matter who requested anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly, and probably also feared being murdered, the Law Review considered the downloads to violate its privacy policy. It probably did, right? And Mr. Wasserman was given a formal reprimand, a letter in the student's Law Review file, but only the Law Review file, never to be shared with anyone outside the journal. And he's days away from graduation. He's already landed a job, violates the privacy policy. He's about to graduate, already landed a job. His time as an editor is pretty much over. He steals all the documents. They said, all right, the upshot of this is you get a formal reprimand in a file that can't leave the confines of the journal, and you're leaving the journal, the review. Your time here is over. That's like nothing. That's not even a slap on the wrist. But it has no doubt and obviously incensed him. And this is the campaign he's now conducting. The Free Beacon article described a pervasive pattern of racial discrimination in hiring editors and selecting articles. The accusations were similar to lawsuits that Mr. Miller's nonprofit group, America First Legal, had helped bring against Northwestern University and New York University in the years before Trump returned to the White House. The suit, by the way, against NYU, dismissed. The Northwestern case remains pending. That's dangerous because, not because it has merit, but because it's still pending at a time when the Trump administration can make a meritless lawsuit work to their advantage anyway. The internal messages and documents published by the Free Beacon showed how race and gender were discussed. Yes. Not considered with disgust, but they were discussed, talked about inside the Law Review. Wow. People who were hiring next year's editors said, what it makes a difference to us that the next class be diverse. Oh, but of course that's terrorism against white men. No, but it did not, these did not indicate that race or gender were predominant considerations behind its final decisions. That's kind of the key there. But you said something about somebody's race, so that's therefore race terrorism. No, you're wrong. The department first disclosed that Mr. Wasserman was providing information to the government in a second letter sent on May 21st, the day before he started his new job. The letter accused the Law Review of retaliating against Mr. Wasserman and instructing him to destroy evidence. What could this possibly be about? What's the kernel of truth behind all of this? Well, first, you need to know that these allegations appeared thin to the Law Review. The journal's position is that it had not asked Mr. Wasserman to destroy evidence, according to the three people familiar with the matter. Instead, the Law Review had asked him to stop disseminating documents that he had taken, stolen really, and to retrieve or destroy any copies he gave to others, the three people said. The original documents remain in the Law Review's possession, these people said. So he stole a bunch of text messages, memos, what have you, that he thinks illustrates this pervasive pattern of discrimination and gave them to the newspapers. And the Law Review said, that's actually a violation of our privacy policy. Don't do that anymore. And stop giving them out to people. You want me to destroy evidence? No. And what do you mean evidence? Evidence of what? We still have this record. Well, it's evidence now. Now you're tampering with a federal investigation. What? There's no federal investigation. Oh, hold on a second. Tap, 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 typey. Now there is, and now you're trying to tamper with evidence in a federal investigation. You just made that investigation up. Yes, but I work in the White House from which place I am entitled to do so. I don't think so. Retaliation also appeared unlikely to have motivated the law review to reprimand Mr. Wasserman. According to the timeline, in the Justice Department's own letters, Wasserman had been told by the law review that there was a preliminary finding that he violated its policies before the department disclosed that he had been providing the government with information. So the idea that they gave him a letter of reprimand because he was, feeding information to the DOJ about their alleged discrimination is impossible. The law review formally issued a letter of reprimand against him before it had been told by Harvard that he was cooperating with the Justice Department. Still, the department was intent on removing the reprimand from Mr. Wasserman's file inside the law review, even though no one will see it. What ended up happening is now the world knows that he was reprimanded by the Harvard Law Review. Before they didn't, but he has Streisand affected his way into letting everyone know. But the demand, he's now using his low-level brand new job from last week somehow to leverage the Harvard Law Review. You got to expunge my record. As far as you're concerned, I've never been disciplined. Erase that from the record. And they're doing it. Prior to Mr. Wasserman's Harvard Law School graduation, scheduled to take place on May 29th, 2025, HLR, Harvard Law Review, of course, must retract the disciplinary action it instituted against him. The Justice Department wrote to Harvard in their third letter. I mean, this guy is the coffee boy, the brand new one. He hadn't even started yet, I guess. And you must do this. This is, of course, he had started. It was the day after, the third letter, the day after he started his job. They wrote, you must expunge the record. Any record of his discipline must be permanently expunged. The department also told the Law Review to retract any instructions to Mr. Wasserman or others to delete responsive documents. Responsive? Responsive to what? These are the documents you stole, but then the president steals them too. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And now, of course, now that we've had our first break, it occurs to me, well, this is an awful long time for a story that we're not so sure of the import of. But it is a small bore story, but it's an interesting thing to note just how, I guess for one thing, how pervasive is the belief in the Trump administration that if you are a coffee boy somewhere in this administration, you can wield the power of the government on your own behalf to settle scores this way. I'd be very curious to know, it doesn't, to this point, tell us anything about who wrote the letters or who claims to have authored the letters. And I mean, at this level, you have to put it to yourself to wonder whether maybe Wasserman, like as soon as he got there, the first day after registering with HR and everything, sat down and wrote a letter claiming that he was acting on behalf of the administration. Or maybe even, my name is Chet Wortherington III, and I work for the very important thing in the White House, the Office of kicking the crap out of Harvard. And you must cease and desist and expunge this guy's record because he's an official government guy now, and you have to stop this whole thing. Why? It doesn't matter. It's a disciplinary file for internal use for a guy who's graduated and isn't on the editorial board anymore. There's nothing we can do with this letter. Well, nonetheless, it's extremely important for federal investigative purposes that this whole thing, tear it up. You got to do it. You want us to tear this thing up to destroy this document? Yeah, in fact, I'm accusing you of destroying documents. You're instructing me to destroy your documents. I mean other ones, the ones that I wanted. Or I don't know. I mean, what is this guy up to? And I guess it just tells us a little bit about how they operate in every arena, I guess. I mean, in that sense, it's kind of an important thing. So yes, so the demand in the last letter that came to Harvard was delivered the day after he started his new job. But before graduation on May 29th, which I guess is a deadline because at that point it would be very difficult to convince anybody that this thing matters, right? On May 23rd, they said by May 29th you have to expunge his disciplinary record and destroy the letter in his file, his secret file. Why? Because that's graduation day. Okay. Any record of his discipline must be permanently expunged, so no one could ever find out that he did this thing or find the record of it. Well, now it's in the newspaper, of course. The department also told the law review that he retract any instructions to Wasserman or others to delete responsive documents. That makes it sound like you delete responsive documents. That's definitely a signal that will perk up the ears of any court reviewing any of these things. That will get you disciplined. You'll get in trouble. You'll lose your case. Destroying responsive documents. Responsive to what? There's been no subpoena. There's been no discovery going on. Well, preserve your records. Well, you preserve your records. You're telling me to destroy the records that we've got. But well, I mean, preserve the other ones then. I don't know. These are some things I learned in law school, and you're supposed to do them. It's basically what it looks like to me. It was an extraordinary effort to use federal power on behalf of after all this person is a friendly witness, somebody who says, you guys keep claiming that there's racial discrimination going on in Harvard. I will give you a story that sounds something like that if you give me a job and allow me to use my job to beat up on these people who I disagreed with a couple weeks ago. Well, fearing the wrath of the Trump administration, law review officials tore up the reprimand. Remember, don't delete responsive documents, except that one. Tear it up. So they did it. They tore up the reprimand and dropped their demands that Wasserman stop disseminating the documents and that others return or delete them. And again, that's at the bottom of this. How dare you tell me to delete responsive documents? No, I'm asking you to return stolen documents. Well, I say it's the other definition. Well, fine. You know what? Go away. They submitted to their demands, but then by the same token, I mean, shouldn't everybody's disciplinary files be shredded when they graduate from law school anyway? I mean, at least the Harvard Law Review ones. Who cares about that, right? So I don't know whether they keep them or not. And they probably shouldn't. But if they do, I don't know. Whatever. I mean, maybe it makes some sense to them. Maybe those people, because they tend to move into leadership, maybe those things have value. I don't know. Anyway, he got in trouble for stealing documents in order to prove the hyperbolic allegations that he was making. He got himself a job that would allow him to pursue full time, making a big deal out of this thing that he perceived to be an insult, and stole documents to quote unquote prove it, and then forced them to expunge their record of his having stolen them. Okay, Trump administration in a nutshell, I guess. There are, of course, other stories dominating the online discussion today, and some odd coincidences, perhaps, or was it motivated by this? I got something in email the other day. Let me scroll back down and try and find it. But longtime listener and correspondent John Ronald, who had sent me this article, which is actually, as I looked at it, it turns out it's an old article. It's from 2022. When did you send this to me? So yesterday at about 2 p.m. Did we already have this other information? I was curious about whether or not this was a response to what was in the news from down in Texas, or whether this was coincidence. But I guess either way, they should be read together. So in the news since Sunday, I guess we'll do it this way, is the news of the murder of an actor who, obviously does his own acting. Yeah, right, okay. I know it's maybe inappropriate. But Jonathan Joss is the actor's name. And I would say, like, for me, he's best known as the voice of the character John Redcorn in King of the Hill, the cartoon. But he's also, a screen actor as well, and had a recurring role, a rather prominent role, it seems. I never watched Parks and Recreation. Should have. Sounds like a good show, actually, but I didn't. But anyway, the point is, he was murdered. He was shot by his neighbor in, I guess, the culmination of a crazy ongoing dispute, which the more information, as more information emerges, is sounding more and more like a pretty clear hate crime against Joss. Joss was gay, and he was regularly assailed with homophobic insults by this neighbor, who eventually also drew a gun and shot him. So let me give you the NBC News report on it, just to bring you up to speed. It's possible that although this is making national news and in part of the national discussion, this hasn't hit you yet. I don't know. Jonathan Joss, King of the Hill voice actor, killed in San Antonio shooting. The 59-year-old actor, best known as the voice of John Redcorn in the hit animated series, died Sunday, police said. So entirely possible this is what motivated John Ronald to send me this other article, which I'll tell you about in a minute. Viola Flowers. Viola? Did she say Viola or Viola? Austin Mullen and Rebecca Cohen are the authors of the piece. Jonathan Joss, the voice actor, as you know, best known as John Redcorn, killed on Sunday. A suspect, 56-year-old Sigfredo Alvarez Queja, was taken into custody and booked on a murder charge, the San Antonio Police Department said. It's interesting, by the way, had Jonathan Joss not been a openly gay actor, but rather a firebrand conservative, the news that he was shot and killed by one Sigfredo Alvarez Queja would be taken very differently. I don't know, and I shouldn't care what Mr. Queja's nationality or citizenship status is, but of course, had the shoe been on the other foot, this would have been, Jonathan Joss would be an angel death, right? Oh my God, they've been murdered by somebody who shouldn't even be here. What should they be? I don't know. Doesn't matter. But interesting to note that that's not the top headline. Just as we discussed, I think, did we discuss it yesterday as we were talking about the attack in Boulder, Colorado? I don't know if we had that information yet, but as it turns out, oh yeah, right. No, they made mention of the fact that this was somebody who was Egyptian and was allegedly here having overstayed a tourist visa that expired in like 2023. But it was interesting to note that the FBI, having under the Trump administration and with Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, reassigned almost all of its counterintelligence group, because they usually found out stuff like, the Russians are manipulating the president again. Well, close the counterintelligence group, move them all to immigration enforcement because that's our priority. And then there's, pretty much immediately a horrific terrorist attack here in the country. Well, we don't have anybody investigating counterterrorism, so whoops, missed that one. So they have to kind of convert it into if we can convert this into an immigration case and say the real tragedy here is not that he used an improvised homemade flamethrower to set 8 people on fire at a demonstration in support of the Israelis still being held hostage in Gaza. Not that. But the real issue is his immigration status. They converted it into an immigration case. He is not even supposed to be here. An illegal alien has done this terrible thing. Okay. Otherwise, they look like idiots for focusing on immigration rather than counterterrorism because, well, there was a terrorist attack. Anyhow, here they're doing the same thing, although in reverse. Anyway, officers were dispatched to Dorsey Drive in San Antonio around 7 p.m. Sunday for a shooting and arrived to find the actor, whose legal name is Jonathan Joss Gonzalez, near the roadway after he was shot, police said. So I guess now there's room for the administration to say, Gonzalez, eh? Authorities attempted life-saving measures until EMS arrived and pronounced Joss, 59, dead. Police have not released any other information on the shooting, at least as of the writing of this article, including a motive, but said on Monday afternoon the homicide unit of the San Antonio Police Department is investigating Joss's death. Oh, really? Oh, thank you. That's nice of you to do. Despite online claims of this being a hate crime, this is the crux of the problem here, currently the investigation has found no evidence to indicate that Mr. Joss's murder was related to his sexual orientation, SAPD said on X. And now, it may very well be the case that they say, actually now 2 days into the investigation, it's now become quite obvious. Or we're ready to release that information. Sometimes they just kind of have to proceed this way. But it's beginning to be very obvious. There's other witnesses, including Joss's husband's statement of what happened that day and prior. This is this guy's lived experience. Now, that's different from what police will consider solid grounds to say we're pursuing charges as a hate crime. They may, in fact, come around to that. But, yeah, this is just one of those, maybe one of those wheels of justice turning slowly things. But it may also be something else, and that's why you put pressure on. And I mean, I guess internally for your own self-care, it's probably best not to escalate this to this is absolutely 100% a cover-up by the San Antonio Police Department, and they're going to go to their graves insisting that this isn't a hate crime. Don't wind yourself up yet to that level. Be prepared for it. Advocate and put on pressure so that they feel compelled to come to that conclusion, which I think is probably the natural one, sooner rather than later. But yeah, I wouldn't drive yourself entirely insane over this just yet. So anyway, continuing with the NBC News report, this is why, this is what people are talking about and why people are talking about it, because Joss's husband, Tristan Kern de Gonzalez, alleged in a social media post that Joss was killed in a homophobic attack at the site of their old home. Now, when they were living there, this is their old home, Kern de Gonzalez said the couple was harassed regularly, this is the quote, harassed regularly by individuals who made it clear that they did not accept our relationship, adding that, quote, much of the harassment was openly homophobic. He said the couple was at the house checking the mail. They had moved out of there, but I guess, just to see if they were still getting mail there, they came to check. And when at that point, guess what? They expecting to find mail, they instead found the skull of their dog, and the dog's harness had been placed out front, causing them to begin, quote, yelling and crying. So I guess at some point they must have, they thought, lost their dog. They probably suspected something, but couldn't prove anything. Their dog was lost. Very sad. They moved probably for other reasons. And then, somebody, I guess, taunting them with, somebody had done this to their dog and was going to taunt them with it by putting it out of their mailbox. So there they are yelling and crying about finding their dog's skull and harness. And I guess that's probably the tip that this is the skull for sure. A man approached them at this point and yelled slurs at them, Kern de Gonzalez said. The man then fired at the couple, he wrote. Jonathan and I had no weapons. We were not threatening anyone. We were grieving. We were standing side by side. When the man fired, Jonathan pushed me out of the way. He saved my life, Kern de Gonzalez said in the social media post. And then, by way of background, after the shocking news of this, they tell us about Josh was the voice of John Redcorn in the Fox animated series from seasons 2 through 13. John Redcorn was a, quote, new age healer and masseur who always was addressed by his full name, Mr. Redcorn. Not always Mr. Redcorn, but John Redcorn. Anyway, the new season of the King of the Hill revival is set to, this is really not important, is it? Debut on Hulu in August. In a credit sequence shared on Friday, John Redcorn is seen driving by in his classic tan Jeep. I guess, well, even before this murder, I guess there were no plans to bring him back as a character. Is that what that's supposed to mean? But they were acknowledging his role in the past. All right. Well, at any rate, that seems less than important. But Joss also played Ken, I don't know how they say the guy's name, the character's name in Park and Recreation. Hotate. Hotate? I guess. I don't know. You tell me. I didn't watch. But he also had roles in Tulsa King and the 2016 remake of The Magnificent Seven. How do you like that? His most recent acting credit, his most recent acting, yes, credit was in 2023 for voicing a character in Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty video game. Okay. Joss's, by the way, huge amounts of work in voicing video games for these actors. It really is an incredible opportunity. I hope they get paid well for it. Probably not, but I hope that they do. And I wonder when can I get some of that money? I'll voice. They are incredibly talented people, generally speaking. Although sometimes the voices, like dubbing things or video game voices, are kind of like, it doesn't sound like they worked real hard on it. And I guess it's low budget and maybe they didn't, but I'll take low budget money. I'll voice something. I don't know. It sounds like a fun way of making a living, but everything does until you have to make your living that way. Joss's family home in San Antonio was destroyed in a fire in January. An online fundraiser stated, is this the house that they went to check the mail at? So the house is burned down, but the mailbox isn't. Destroyed by fire in January. Gee whiz, what's going on here? An online fundraiser stated 3 of his dogs had been killed in the fire and raised more than $10,000. Joss told a local reporter then that he did not have a job. And in his statement, Joss's husband alleged that he had previously reported threats that neighbors had made about destroying the home. Probably by burning it down. So, again, they're getting no, satisfaction, I guess, here from the San Antonio Police Department. That's the big problem. But again, that too could be wheels turning slowly or could be, in fact, discrimination. Representatives and family, by the way, of Joss could not be immediately reached for comment. I don't know why I went out of my way to say that, but it's at the end of the article here. In his statement, Joss's husband alleged that he had previously reported threats that the neighbors had made about destroying the home, and they basically got no action from it. And you can kind of imagine why. Well, are you sure that that's what they threatened? Well, he didn't say, I am going to burn your house down using chemical accelerant tomorrow at 6 p.m. But yeah, he was pretty clear about that. Well, I think it's just hyperbole. I can tell he's homophobic probably from the content of his comments, but I can't prosecute homophobia. And so they basically have to stand there and wait for some lunatic to shoot them and burn their house down. So now he's burned the house down and they still didn't do anything. Well, we can't prove. Yeah, I know. Right. And similarly, we can't prove that he did it because he was homophobic at this point either, but eventually they may come around to it. Like I said, the pressure is wise, I think, and well intended. But yeah, you should be careful of your own mental health here. Don't burn yourself out protesting over it or wind yourself up in conspiracy theories before they've had some ample opportunity to turn those wheels of justice, slow as they may be. But it always does seem to go this way, whether it's domestic abuse cases that get ignored until it's too late, or women and stalking cases that are ignored until it's too late. It always seems to be the way. But that's the American justice system. Everybody is innocent until proven guilty. But one of the problems is that the way you get proven guilty is murder. You do a murder, and then they get around to proving it. They're innocent until they murder you, and they're even innocent after they murder you until we prove that they were the ones murdering you. I don't know. So it's crazy news, sad news. It's always got an interesting hook to it when it's somebody that is famous in some way. And by the way, I guess that's the answer about how well voiceover work pays, right? Their home was burnt down and they needed to do a GoFundMe fundraiser for $10,000 to relocate because he hadn't been working. He had worked up to 2023, but, I guess they're not pouring gobs of cash into the voiceover work such that you can just coast from 2023 to 2025 on your residuals. So they're working as hard as anybody else. I'll say that. So the other thing that was on my mind was this article that John had sent to me. John Ronald sent, and he's down in Texas, sent me this article, which is a little dated. And I looked around briefly to see if there was something updated about it. And I'm sure there's something, but it didn't jump right out of me in the cursory search. Although now everything, what is a search now? You Google search something and it tells you the AI answer to what it thinks you were looking for. And then a couple of articles. But this article that John had sent from reformaustin.org, written on September 8th, 2022. Jeff Rauner is the author of the piece. Texas mass shootings at that point in 2022 were up 62.5% since the signature on the permitless carry bill there in Texas. So again, in September of 22, the word was that just over a year ago, so sometime in August, September 2021, Governor Greg Abbott signed a law making it legal for anyone in Texas over the age of 21 to openly carry a gun in public without a permit or a license. And that since then, the number of mass shootings has risen 62.5%. I think at some point the mayor of one of the major cities there, and maybe it was San Antonio, I don't know, that I saw in my quick Google review. But one of the mayors of the major cities in Texas cited this statistic and, of course, was attacked for doing so. But wow, mass shootings up 62.5% in 1 year, eh? From June 13th, 2020 to June 13th, 2021, when Abbott signed the permitless carry law, Texas had 40 mass shootings. Bad number, to be sure, but okay. In that same time period from 2021 to 2022, the number of mass shootings rose to 65. The numbers were compiled using the databases from the Stanford University MSA Data Project, the Mass Shooting Tracker, Vox's Gun Violence Archives, Mother Jones, the Washington Post, the FBI, the Congressional Research Service, all providing some data for this. All incidences met at least two definitions of a mass shooting. Okay. That's the methodology. The math is even more damning when taking the number of victims into account. In the 1 year period before the bill was signed, 187 people killed or injured in mass shootings in Texas. Horrific, right? In the 1 year period after, 375 people killed or injured, a 100% increase. Even if the 40 people killed or injured in the Robb Elementary School massacre are excluded, Uvalde, right? Excluded, the increase is still 79%, an enormous jump in bloodshed. When the bill was signed, Texas Democrats predicted that the law would likely increase gun violence. The permitless carry bill will cause more violence and loss, United States Representative Veronica Escobar from El Paso said in a statement at the time. Despite overwhelming support for common sense gun violence prevention legislation like universal background checks, Texas Republicans, led by a cowardly governor, are more interested in groveling for the gun lobby's attention than they are in preventing gun violence and honoring victims and survivors in El Paso and across Texas. And that grim prediction has come true. These numbers do not even take into account shootings of less than 4 people at any one time. That's the definition of the mass shooting that most people are working with. Totals for all gun violence tend to lag behind mass shootings as they get less press coverage. And the numbers from last year are still not widely available from sources yet, let alone for 2022 so far. ABC 13 recently stated that since the bill had been passed, shooting deaths in the state were up 5%, with injuries being up 3%. Permitless carry isn't without some restrictions. It only applies to handguns, which must be holstered. Those who are prohibited by state and federal law are still banned, and private businesses can still bar guns from their property. Despite these restrictions, permitless carry has been consistently linked to worse outcomes as the number of untrained armed residents increases. States that have weakened or eliminated law enforcement authority to deny permits to people who pose a danger have experienced an 11% increase in handgun homicide rates and a 13 to 15% increase in violent crime rates, says Everytown Research and Policy. Nevertheless, states have been steadily loosening their gun control laws under pressure from conservatives who feel that a Democratic president, Biden at that point, of course, is more likely to start confiscating weapons. Despite no evidence to support that assertion, across the board, these states experience more violence than those who do not, with Texas being among the deadliest, that is, who do not have these restrictions removed. Intuitive answer, I think. Everybody probably should have guessed that that was going to be the case. And now here we are, although there hasn't been an updated article that I could find immediately, anyway, since 2022, to see whether the trend has continued. We now have people spouting off at one another and having disagreements with their neighbors and pulling weapons and shooting them down. Now, we always had that. That's surely true, but the question is, are we having it more often? Because it certainly seems like it. We're certainly having mass shootings more often. That seems clear. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. I am looking around to see whether I can discover, more information about where I might want to head next. There's a couple other stories to share, and one or two that are perhaps as obscure, one that's almost as obscure as the Stephen Miller weirdo staffer pursuing his own retribution agenda against Harvard. And that one comes from out of the Forest Service, and again from the New York Times. And why not? Well, Tuesday's a good day for these kinds of stories, I guess. This is another obscure story that just feels like it illustrates another angle of Trump administration corruption. There's the big time Trump involved corruption, just outright theft, like the crypto scams and the jumbo jet from Qatar and God knows what else. And then there's the other small ways in which other hangers-on use government power in petty ways to, get what they want, whether it's revenge on Harvard or in the case of Michael Boren, nominated by President Trump to be the Forest Service administrator, and the way he's using government power, and was just previously using the power of money to get what he wanted. But the money can get you only so far if the government is the hurdle you're trying to overcome. So one of the things you got to do is use that money to take over the government and make your activity that was illegal into totally legal stuff. This is, again, piece in the New York Times. He built an airstrip on protected land. which I guess implies that you're not supposed to be doing that there. He's now in line to lead the Forest Service. And the linkage you're supposed to make there, I guess, in your mind is that land was protected by the Forest Service. You can't build that here. Oh, yeah? Look at me. Look at me. I'm the Forest Service captain now. That's what's happening here. Michael Boren, nominated by President Trump, is accused of threatening trail workers with a helicopter. Oh, yeah, how dare you make this trail? I'm going to give you a helicopter. Not like that. I'm going to chop you up with my helicopter's blades. That's the threat. Building an airstrip without a permit. Who needs permits for anything now? And putting a cabin on federal property, which is, I don't know what the explanation he gives for that one is, but it kind of like, wait a minute, you build a house on property that isn't yours? I mean, isn't that just kind of basically wrong? The fact that it's federal property, even worse, but what are you doing building things there? Well, he's trying to take adverse possession of it. Okay, go to law school and learn about that in property class. Hiroko Tabuchi is the name of the author of this piece in the New York Times. Michael Boren, and I'm not certain whether he's any relation. There was a David Boren, was a senator from Nebraska, a Democrat, back in the day, and I'm wondering, as it turns out, Michael Boren, I don't know if there's any relation, but Michael Boren has a brother named David Boren. I was wondering, oh my God, I wonder if they're related. I don't think so, because this is all taking place in Idaho, but you never know. It wasn't Nebraska, it was Oklahoma, by the way. And now I'm just sort of curious, if I go to the personal life part for David Boren, I'm curious whether it'll tell me, oh yeah, he's got 2 sons, and they're the exact same names of the people you were just reading about. I'm curious. I hope not, but let's see. Does it say anything about kids here? Not so far. All right, skimming along. Yeah. His son, David, served in the U.S. House of Representatives from Oklahoma from 2005 to 2013. But I think it's just coincidence. I don't know how common the Boren last name actually is, but it doesn't sound like an uncommon and weird one. So anyway, I think there's no relation. I certainly hope there's no relation, because this one's a jerk. Anyway, Michael Boren, founder of a $1 billion tech company. Sure, why not? Everybody is at this point. And he's also an Idaho ranch owner and Trump donor, has clashed with the U.S. Forest Service for years. And very often when you run into this kind of person, I'm an Idaho ranch owner. It's not, I live in Idaho full time and I'm a rancher. If you're a billionaire tech guy, owning a ranch in Idaho is sometimes just kind of a hobby. I went to the West once and I went riding on a horse and it was pretty cool. I'll spend $1 billion on a ranch, because what do I care? And I'll go there once and then forget about it. Who knows? I don't know what his deal is, but maybe we'll find out if we just read this article. Well, anyway, he was accused, among other things, of flying a helicopter dangerously close to a crew building a Forest Service trail. He was upset with them for a reason we'll learn about later, prompting officials to seek a restraining order. He got a caution from the Forest Service and criticism from his neighbors when he built a private airstrip on his ranch called Hell Roaring Ranch. And this ranch, by the way, in the middle of a national recreation area. And in the fall, the Forest Service sent a cease and desist letter, there's that again, accusing a company that Mr. Boren controlled of building an unauthorized cabin on national forest land. Now, Mr. Boren is Mr. Trump's nominee to oversee the very agency he has tussled with repeatedly. What an amazing coincidence that is, and a solid pattern there. Elon Musk, you want to be in charge of destroying the federal agencies that are tussling with you? Sure, I'll take it. Kash Patel, investigated by the FBI. Why don't you take over the FBI and see what you can do about that investigation? Like maybe get rid of it, expunge your record. Where would other people get the idea that you could use federal government power for that? On Tuesday, the Senate Agriculture Committee is scheduled to hold a confirmation hearing, that's today, on Mr. Boren's nomination to be the Undersecretary of Agriculture for Natural Resources and Environment, a role that would put him in charge of the Forest Service. Wow, isn't that amazing? All his troubles are going to go away with the Forest Service. If confirmed, he would manage an agency that oversees almost 200 million acres of public lands across the United States, including maintaining trails, which he didn't want them to do apparently, coordinating wildfire response, rake the forest, and overseeing the sale of timber and other resources. I have a feeling he's about to establish a new billion-dollar business in timber. He would also oversee the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which helps farmers and ranchers conserve natural resources on their own land. Pay me, and I'll do it. Mr. Boren would be leading the Forest Service at a tumultuous time. In April, the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, issued an order removing environmental protections from almost 60% of national forests, or more than 112 million acres, mostly in the West. That came after Mr. Trump issued an executive order to increase logging on those lands by 25%, not just get rid of restrictions on logging. I want you to increase it by 25%. For what reason? I don't know. What are we doing with the logs that's so important? The Forest Service has also fired thousands of workers as part of Mr. Trump's drive to shrink the federal government. By the way, ironically enough, who are they firing? Firefighters, among other things. So this year's fire season ought to be something. Mr. Boren is, quote, a successful businessman who has founded 6 companies, Mr. Trump said in January when he announced his nomination in a post on Truth Social. Michael will work to reinvigorate forest management at a time when it is desperately needed, he wrote. Congratulations, Michael. Okay, sure. 6 companies. I'm always kind of confused by that, the serial entrepreneur thing. Like, why not found one company and have it do lots of things? No, I'm going to found 6 companies, which usually, to me, is usually a signal that 5 of them don't really do anything. But, okay. And sometimes it's like, well, one of my companies is my apartment built over garage LLC. You're renting out, the room over your garage or something. It's a company. I founded it. I'm an entrepreneur. Some environmental groups and experts are wary of this guy, I guess. In a different world, one of them says, one that existed a year ago, this would be a really, really strange appointment, said Gerald Long, a professor at the University of Idaho College of Law and former Justice Department official who specialized in land use and environmental law. His antagonism toward the Forest Service, that is to say Boren's, suggests that it's consistent with what has happened at the federal agencies, where the intent is to radically reshape what the Forest Service does. Instead of protecting forests and telling rich landowners stop logging it and stealing it and selling the wood and pocketing the money, or building your cabin on federal property and saying it's yours, now you should do that. There you go, dramatically reshaped. You should do that. Anybody? Well, okay, then I'm going to do it too. No, you're not. You're not in the federal government. He is. He gets to do it because we put him here because he's rich. He started 6 businesses. Now he's got a 7th, stealing land. In a statement, the Agriculture Department said Mr. Boren would, quote, implement President Trump's America First agenda and ensure our forest system is properly managed, productive, and resilient. We look forward to a swift confirmation by the Senate. The White House, as well as lawyers and representatives representing the Boren family, didn't respond to detailed questions for this article. Too bad. By the way, what's the America First agenda when it comes to managing trees that are growing here? Like, no more Chinese trees being planted in national forests. What is there an America First problem there that I don't know about? Mr. Boren made his fortune in technology and investing and has little experience in public lands management, except for trying to steal public land, I guess. In 2001, he partnered with his brother Dave Boren, that's what made me wonder, and another banking associate to found Clearwater Analytics, an investment and accounting software company based in Boise, Idaho. He has also become a reliable Republican campaign donor, giving to the Republican National Committee as well as to Mr. Trump. And if you ask me, what we really needed was more accounting software. And how did that become a billionaire? I don't know. Just did. In 2021, Clearwater debuted on the New York Stock Exchange with a valuation of $5.5 billion. Mr. Boren apparently no longer holds a position at the company. They started 6 companies and 5 of them have kicked him out for some reason. Mr. Boren is a visionary, proven leader, I guess, according to Governor Brad Little of Idaho, a Republican. In Idaho, we manage our lands effectively and efficiently, and Mr. Boren would bring that same mentality to the Forest Service, the governor said. He and his brother both share a passion for ranching and own land in Idaho. Well, yeah, they're founding businesses in Idaho. They also own land there. What's going on? 2015 was when Boren bought Hell Roaring Ranch, a 480-acre cattle ranch within the congressionally mandated Sawtooth National Recreation Area, an expanse of panoramic mountain terrain, lakes and rivers in central Idaho that is managed by the Forest Service. Private property is allowed within the recreation area, although rules prohibit development that detracts from its scenic, natural, historic, or ecological value. And he wanted to have that, something that would detract from that stuff. And it's against the rules. But he said, rules schmools, I'm going to do it anyway. And it's hard to get to one of these places. I love living in this ranch. It has such a wild terrain and it's so beautiful and I love it. Yeah, well, so do many other millions of people. Yeah, but I only want it for myself. And also it's hard to get here. So I'd like to be able to fly my plane to it. Problem is, it's wild, rugged ranch land in the mountains. I don't have an airstrip. But I could build one because I'm a billionaire. No, you can't, because you're not supposed to do anything that detracts from the natural ruggedness and beauty that makes this a national wildlife preserve or national forest preserve. Well, screw you, I'm going to do it anyway. All right, well, then we're going to fine you. Well, screw you, I'm going to buy the Forest Service and I'm going to unfine myself. That's what we got going on here. Soon after Boren bought the land, he set about flattening part of his pasture. It is a ranch, right? For what he told the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who I guess have the jurisdiction there. Why are you flattening all this land when it's supposed to be beautiful and rugged? Well, this is pasture improvement to eliminate gopher holes and weeds. It's like, this is a national, recreation area managed by the Forest Service. There's gophers and weeds. Yeah. Oh, what's the problem? Well, but it's a cattle ranch. I don't want the cows to sprain their ankles. Okay. Interesting though, but this pasture that you're flattening is very narrow and very, very long. And in the shape of an airstrip is basically what happens, right? The 2,500 foot long site looked very much like an airstrip, something that many of his neighbors said ran afoul of the rules that limit development in the recreation area, right? Natural beauty, not airstrips. Mr. Boren then installed $1 million hangar and fuel tanks, which are definitely not natural, kinds of things. And neighbors started to report small aircraft and helicopters taking off and landing at the airstrip. Mr. Boren's brother, Dave Boren, separately owns a 1,700-acre ranch in central Idaho. I don't know if it's close by or somewhere else. In 2019, Dave Boren sued the federal government over work on a Forest Service trail that cut through his property on an easement, saying the work would harm the environment. Oh, no, not that. As well as his use of the property. I suspect that is actually the first concern. The following summer, after a federal court had denied an injunction against the Forest Service's work and trail construction had resumed, a helicopter registered to Michael Boren appeared and flew close to the construction crew. We saw this helicopter less than 100 feet off the ground, and it started coming toward us, said Dave Coyner, who was leading the construction crew that day. They were definitely trying to intimidate us. The Justice Department sought a restraining order against Mr. Boren, claiming he was piloting the craft and had buffeted the government's contractors with helicopter rotor wash, sediment, and other debris during several low-level passes, and that contractor employees understandably felt threatened. Apparently there's some video of it here as well. The order was ultimately not issued, though a U.S. magistrate judge warned Dave and Michael Boren against further interference with the project. Now, I can't prove that, but you behave yourselves. or we're going to come after you again. All right, Mr. Judge. P.S. Let's take over this Forest Service and get rid of this stuff. To hear that he's now being nominated to be Undersecretary for the Forest Service, that just blows me away, Mr. Coyner said in an interview. In February of 2021, when Mr. Boren finally applied for a county permit for the airstrip, hundreds of people submitted public comments in opposition. Some accused him of having lied about his plans and of destroying the scenic Idaho landscape, which he did. And they dismissed Mr. Boren's suggestions that he had intended the airstrip as a public service for use during emergencies, Sure. Michael Boren, a multimillionaire from Boise, is illegally operating an airport in the Sawtooth Valley without permits. Gary Gadwa, a retired search and rescue operator, wrote in an opinion essay in the Idaho Falls Post-Register. Now, a search and rescue operator probably actually would be interested in having a legal and public use airstrip and helipad in the area, but knows better than to actually believe that this would be used for public service. Idahoans need to band together, he said, to halt this dangerous precedent, which threatens the use of one of the most beloved wilderness areas of our state. At a public hearing on his permit, televised by the local station KTVB7, Mr. Boren said on television he needed the modest airstrip to ranch. We did everything that we could do to do the right thing, he said. We didn't build an airport. It's an irrigated pasture, and also where we land aircraft. Mr. Boren overcame the opposition and received his county permit. So what's the beef? I don't know. The Forest Service warned him also in an August 2021 letter against further work on the land. All right, you've built your airstrip. Now let's leave it at that. Well, any future use or development of the property, including unlimited use of the airstrip, could lead the Forest Service to determine that the area had been significantly impaired, wrote Kirk Flanagan, an area ranger. Then Mr. Boren sued his critics. In June of 2022, he sued Mr. Gadwa and others who had spoken out against him for defamation. Very Trumpy. First Amendment lawyers and other legal observers said the suit was designed to intimidate critics and stifle their right to freedom of speech. Perfect. In his amended complaint, Mr. Boren said the defendants and their co-conspirators appear to hate Boren, due, at least in part, to his success and his political and religious beliefs, not the airport he built in the middle of our neighborhood. A spokesman for Mr. Boren's family had previously said Mr. Boren is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The complaint did not elaborate on how Mr. Boren's faith played a role. It just did. Shut up. The defendants have denied Boren's claims, and among the people Boren sued was Dick Fosbury, a county commissioner and celebrated Olympic champion who's known, yes, I wondered about that, for inventing the Fosbury flop, a once revolutionary high jump style that today would be familiar to anyone who would ever watch the event. The jumper, well, I mean, do you really need an explanation of the Fosbury flop? It's the modern method of high jumping, although I do think somebody went to the front rollover method again recently. But anyway, Fosbury hanging out there in the middle of Idaho, I guess, and he had criticized Boren for constructing that airstrip without permits, but then subsequently died from cancer, we note, sadly, here in March of 2023. But you'll be happy to know that Mr. Boren here, on his millions and possibly billions of dollars and acres of ranch land and private airstrip, made sure that Dick Fosbury's last days were tormented by lawsuits. So there you go. John Conte, a Boise-based filmmaker, was also sued. He had briefly posted a YouTube video, referring to a wealthy businessman who had illegally built an airport on his ranch and whom he described with an expletive. Mr. Conte declined to talk specifically about the case, fearing retaliation from Mr. Boren. The Sawtooths are the last wild frontier, really untouched, he said, and I think that most Idahoans would like to see it stay that way. But not Boren. An Idaho district judge dismissed Boren's defamation lawsuit in 2022, saying it had the potential for a great chilling effect on constitutional rights. Boren, who hates the Constitution, I guess, appealed to the Idaho Supreme Court, which in December said the lower court had erred in dismissing it. The case is now headed back to district court. So I guess the Idaho Supreme Court doesn't like the Constitution much either. Mr. Boren has had other run-ins with the Forest Service and with his neighbors. Hope he's not going to shoot anybody. In 2022, drivers found a gate blocking access to about a mile of Forest Service road that passes through private land owned by West Pass Ranch, LLC, whose owners included Mr. Boren. It's not even where he's living. A sign blamed numerous trespass and private property rights violations for the closure. The Forest Service said at the time that it had been working with the landowners to find a solution. Last fall, the Forest Service sent a cease and desist letter to a company then registered to Mr. Boren, Galena Mines, after discovering what the agency said was an unauthorized cabin and cleared land within the National Forest System, close to private land held by the company. Is that land company land over there? No. Well, let's build a cabin on it, and if they don't knock it down in 10 years, it will be our land. By the way, National Forest land. What should we do with it? Cut down all the trees. Yeah, cool. Mr. Boren was removed from Galena Mines' registration on February 24th. There is no indication of any mining plans, by the way. The company is thought to have bought up old mining claims. Why? For access to the land. So he's started 6 companies. He's very successful. One of the companies is your job is to buy old mine land and build a cabin on it for me. What a great company. Anyway, the Forest Service told Mr. Boren to restore the land by August, according to the letter, but now the agency believes Galena Mines has built a waterway to the cabin in defiance of its request, according to 3 people with knowledge of the suspected infraction. That's the end of the article, and now, of course, if they have their hearing today, if they go ahead and recommend his confirmation and the Senate does in fact confirm him for the job, he'll show up and fire all the people who said he should not be building cabins in the National Forest and pretending it was his land. And in fact, they'll say, you know what, how about a document that says it is my land? I just made another $1 million because I stole land from the federal government and gave it to myself. Exactly who you want as a neighbor out there. All right, wild and free. Just bringing you up to date on, again, the many ways in which the Trump administration and the people in it offend reality in every single way over and over and over again. All right, other stories that I can share with you. We're just about coming up to that third break. But that'll give me a chance to search out and I guess to request, maybe I should contact Greg about this one, but another Atlantic article that I think might be of some interest, although it looks rather lengthy, that sounds intriguing. And I had heard something about this too the other day, actually a couple of weeks ago, that I think maybe the reporters involved in this story are the ones who had sort of pulled the stunt. This is a piece called The Secret History of Trump's Private Cell Phone. Ashley Parker and Michael Scherer write this for The Atlantic, and the subheader reads as, "Who's calling?" the president asks as he answers call after call from numbers he doesn't know. All right. Now, I would have maybe waited to drop that one and not made it the subheader here, but it is rather intriguing and draws you in. I'll read you what I can before we hit the paywall to give you an idea of what's going on here. Just before Election Day, a disturbing piece of information made its way to Donald Trump. Whenever he takes or makes calls on his personal cell phone, Trump learned, Chinese hackers could be listening and gathering intelligence. Now, I want to point out for the moment here, what they mean is Chinese hackers could be listening to what Donald Trump says. And in a traditional sense, that would be considered gathering intelligence because the guy was running for president at the time and might, in fact, win the presidency. And ordinarily, listening to the president or president-elect's conversations would reveal some intelligence. But maybe not so much here. But still, this would be stuff he wouldn't want anyone listening to, anyone who isn't in his inner circle. So in that sense, yes, gathering intelligence. Iranians had already hacked into his campaign's email system, which was not a problem for Trump personally because he had never liked putting things in writing anyway. And the Chinese had breached the emails of the Republican National Committee, but now the hackers had compromised the backbone of U.S. telecommunications networks, according to federal officials who publicly described the intrusion on October 25th, which allowed them to eavesdrop on calls involving Trump, his running mate J.D. Vance, and other political figures. And some in the campaign took immediate action, abandoning long-time numbers, experimenting with burner phones, or switching to end-to-end encrypted applications such as Signal for voice calls so that they would not route through the central switching hubs. But Trump appeared unperturbed by the news, two people familiar with the episode told us, on the condition of anonymity so that they could speak frankly. For more than a decade, the once and future president had been warned of the enormous risks he took and perhaps the top global target of foreign intelligence services by using a personal iPhone with a broadly circulated number to keep in touch with dozens of friends and colleagues. And that's not even getting to the stuff that is actually sort of prank-like that these guys pulled. I'll tell you after that.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen versus Space Cadets and We Need to Talk about Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, so as we were cutting out here, we can tell you what I can tell you without getting through to the Atlantic thing, and I don't know, I'm hesitant to consider a Atlantic subscription, although it does frustrate me endlessly. But we'll see if we can't come up with it. But I knew this rang a bell for me, and I don't know if this is the story, but there's another piece in the Atlantic from the same authors from late April, which is under the equally intriguing title, I Run the Country and the World. I guess that's a quote from Trump. Donald Trump believes he's invincible, but the cracks are beginning to show, say the same two authors, Ashley Parker and Michael Scherer. And that story might be the origin of the story that I had heard, basically that these reporters had gotten hold of his cell phone number, of Trump's personal cell phone number. And what else was going on? Was it the Signal gate happening at the same time, right? With the Signal leaks of the sharing of operational war plans for bombings in Yemen. Right, you remember all of that. And right around the same time, these reporters, I guess, had at some point been handed somehow the number. And I guess the story, as I remember hearing it in passing, through social media, was they couldn't, they got this number and they're like, can you really, honestly, this is the president's number? That seems really, like a huge security problem. I wonder what would happen if we called him and just started asking him questions. What would happen? And I guess they figured, well, he'll never answer. One, because he's the president and he's busy. And two, because when our number rings on his phone, he's not going to have our numbers in his phone. So it's going to come up as unknown caller. President of the United States. One, probably pretty busy. Two, probably not answering his own phone. Three, certainly not going to spend his time, his presidential time, answering phone calls from unknown numbers like an idiot. I mean, most people whose jobs are not nearly that important just say, unknown number. I'm not answering that. It's a waste of my time. But not Donald Trump. He just loves chatting on the phone. So they found they would call over and over again from different numbers, all blocked or unknown numbers. And he would pick up anyway. Who's calling? Who's calling, please? What? Are you crazy? But apparently that's what he does with his time. And, he's, I guess, stuck in, like with everything else, stuck in a time when there was no particular disadvantage to picking up the phone and saying, who's calling? And, if you don't want to talk to him, you can just hang up, sure. But, if you're stuck in 1980s, 1990s, you weren't yet, I don't think, overwhelmed by scam artists or telemarketers, et cetera. It existed, but it wasn't quite the plague that it is now. Plus, of course, being targeted by international intelligence operations. Anyway, this other article from April by the same authors begins this way. Interestingly enough, before they begin, it begins like this. A primer, if you prefer, on the science of arranging an interview with a sitting American president. This must be the origin of this story that I had heard. In ordinary times, reporters seeking an on-the-record encounter with the commander-in-chief must first write an elaborate proposal. The proposal details the goals of the interview, the broad areas of concern, and the many reasons that the president must, for his own good, talk to these particular reporters and not others. Perfectly adequate, but still lesser reporters, of course. This pitch is then sent to the White House officials, to White House officials. If the universe bends favorably, negotiations ensue. If the staff feel reasonably confident that the interview will somehow help their cause, they will ask the president, with trepidation at times, to sit for the interview. Sometimes the president will agree. Such is what happened recently to us. We went through this process in the course of reporting the story you are reading, or at least part of it. We made our pitch, which went like this. President Donald Trump, by virtue of winning a second term and so dramatically reshaping the country and the world, can now be considered the most consequential American leader of the 21st century, and we want to describe in detail how this came to be. Just 4 years ago, after the violent insurrection he fomented, Trump appeared to be finished. Social media companies had banned or suspended him, and he had been repudiated by corporate donors. Republicans had denounced him. The country was moving on to the fresh start of Joe Biden's presidency. Then came further blows, the indictments, the civil judgments, and the endless disavowals by people who had once worked for him. And yet, here we are, months into a second Trump term. We wanted to hear, in his own words, how he'd pulled off one of the most remarkable comebacks in political history and what lessons, if any, he'd internalized along the way. None, but good questions nonetheless. And that was the premise of this whole thing. What I can't get to is the story of how they ended up with the phone number and just kept calling him, and he kept answering. Who's calling, please? It's us again, sir. Will you talk to us about, China or whatever it is? It was just, I don't know. But apparently this is a huge thing and an ongoing thing. And he continues to just ignore all warnings and all advice. And, it may be that there's, ironically, in the end, something to the idea of, well, they're never going to get any intelligence from me. That's for sure. But, I don't know. So he seems to be double, triple dog daring them to get some intelligence out of wiretapping them. But I'll see what I can do to arrange or finally give in and start a free trial or something like that, or just bite the bullet and swallow the cost. I don't know. I haven't checked lately to see what it costs to subscribe to The Atlantic, but it's obviously a recurring problem. So maybe it's time to give in, even though every once in a while, like the New York Times, they publish something that infuriates everyone. But perhaps we just ignore it when they do. All right. Let me give you this story. Here's something that I have not covered, but I mentioned the other day in passing, and it's now one of those things that's so bizarre, nobody even knows how to deal with it. And it's also happening in Texas, which is also weird. And it comes to us from the Texas Tribune, and it gets the rather, I mean, in comparison to the details of the story, anodyne headline: Top deputies to Attorney General Ken Paxton, boo, we know that guy's a jerk, pushed out over sexual harassment allegations, lawsuit says. And even that, that's lurid in a way, but not nearly descriptive of what the details of the story are actually like. The harassment, the subheader says, allegedly took place while the two were on leave from the agency working on Paxton's impeachment defense. And I guess don't forget that as background to the Ken Paxton saga in general. Zach Despart is the author of this May 28th piece, again in the Texas Tribune. And, well, it goes like this. Two of Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's top deputies were forced to resign in 2023 over allegations of harassment, according to court filings included in a lawsuit Tuesday. So late May, the lawsuit happens. All right. So back in 2023, two of his top deputies forced to resign while they were, I guess, working on his impeachment defense. Judd Stone is the problem guy in all of this. Former Solicitor General, and Chris Hilton, an Assistant Attorney General, both sued in federal court by Jordan Eskew, another former employee of the Attorney General's office. Eskew alleges that she was subjected to sexual harassment by Stone, and that Hilton verbally berated her and took no action to protect her from Stone's inappropriate comments. Almost, sadly, standard sounding stuff to this point. I mean, don't dismiss it. It's horrible, and we all have to live with it. And this seems to be the story of every sexual harassment tale ever told. Reporting somebody and having unsympathetic bosses, or even bosses allied with the accused, doing nothing at best or making things actively worse, as frequently the case. All right, so what happened? Eskew alleges that she was subjected to sexual harassment by Stone, and that Hilton verbally berated her and took no action to protect her. The harassment took place, she said, while the three were on leave from the state agency to work on Paxton's defense team during his 2023 impeachment trial, which is rather amazing. Again, right? You're being impeached, and the people you have working on your defense, who probably shouldn't be working on your defense, but have taken leave from your office to do so anyway, are themselves committing crimes and various impeachable offenses as a hobby while they're working on defending you from impeachment. State law requires that the OAG, Office of the Attorney General, and managers immediately take action to stop sexual harassment. First Assistant Attorney General Brent Webster wrote to another agency employer in December of 2024 in an email that was included in the lawsuit. Judd and Chris would be notified that they would be terminated if they did not resign. So I guess that's how they ended up resigning. But I'm also, by the way, remembering at the time, wasn't Greg Abbott the one where he was signing, I don't know, he was signing some obnoxious bill or another, and critics were saying, I forget exactly what it was. It might have been like probably an abortion restriction. And what are you going to do in cases when people are raped and they become pregnant? Now you're going to force them to carry their rapist baby to term. And his answer was, well, we're going to stop all the rapes in this state. We're just gonna. Right? One of the steps you would want along the way is, well, what if the Attorney General's office, one, he's being impeached, and two, while he's being impeached, his top deputies who take a leave to defend him from impeachment are sexually harassing one another? Wouldn't that be part of your effort? Maybe you want to, step in at some point in order to prevent what could develop to a situation where, now you've got a rape on your hands. No, actually. Well, let's not do anything. Oh, that's kind of what I expected was going to happen. Anyway, Yeah, so who are we talking to? First Assistant Attorney General Brent Webster wrote to another agency employee in December of 24 that Judd and Chris would be notified that they would be terminated if they didn't resign as a result of these revelations from Jordan Eskew. Stone and Hilton, through a spokesperson, said they left the Attorney General's office voluntarily because Webster was a petty tyrant for telling them, hey, a third employee of the office who is also on leave to defend Ken in the middle of his impeachment when we really don't need this kind of stuff, says you're sexually harassing her. You need to go. You're a petty tyrant. Brent Webster has a personal vendetta against Mr. Hilton and Mr. Stone, said a spokesperson for their law firm, Stone Hilton. That's a great name for it, by the way. This lawsuit is his creation and a complete fabrication. That's their claim. The Attorney General's office in 2023 confirmed their exits, but did not give reasons for their resignations. Stone, this is where it becomes really kind of like, oh, you mean he's a complete wackadoodle and dangerous pervert? Like maybe. This, though, is where the story really starts to go off the rails. Stone, I guess the problem that was bothering Eskew, Stone shared violent rape fantasies with Eskew, the complaint alleges. What are you doing for lunch? Rape fantasies. All right. See you later. Let's not have this. It also claims Stone regularly berated her, calling her white trash in one instance. Okay. In another, it states that Stone, quote, began screaming, unquote, at Eskew over a spreadsheet. The complaint describes Hilton as witnessing many of these interactions and failing to intervene. Stone, who joined the Attorney General's office in 2021, was responsible for representing the state of Texas in court. He's the Solicitor General there, including when before the U.S. Supreme Court. Hilton, who was hired in 2016, led the General Litigation Division. After Paxton was acquitted by the Senate in September of 2023, Stone, Hilton, Eskew, and other employees who had taken leave to defend him returned to the Attorney General's office. According to Webster's email, which Eskew's lawyer included in the complaint, 2 women who worked with Stone and Hilton during the impeachment in October separately reported credible complaints of sexual misconduct. Webster said he notified Paxton, who was shocked and appalled at the allegations, and agreed to take immediate action. Agency staff confronted Stone about the behavior, Webster wrote, and Stone promptly admitted that all the allegations were true. But something petty tyrant. So I don't know. This guy may be a little bit imbalanced. They're doing this very politely here, by the way, and the social media descriptions of his rape fantasies, as they called them, bad enough, right? Just with that description. But the details of them are, clearly they're going to be bad. But this is like almost literally otherworldly bad. And I don't know whether they get around to this description or not, or whether I parked any of the descriptions someplace. But there's rape fantasies, and then there's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, crazy ass, this guy needs to be locked up for his own protection stuff. This is not, normal. And maybe you've heard some of it. Is this not described here in this article? I don't think so. I should look back in Pocket to see whether I also put alongside this thing or somewhere earlier some of the social media descriptions of what the so-called fantasies were about. And I don't even really honestly know how you come to imagine such things. But is this it? I don't know. I gotta poke around to see if I can find this wacko description. Maybe this is it here. I must have put aside here's the Blue Sky post about it from Robert Downen, who is Robert Downen, Texas Monthly writer, focused on the far right, as it turns out, and the focus was correct. So I don't think that this is described, but let me get through the Texas Tribune polite version of it first, and then I'll turn back to this post. So anyway, yeah, they alleged that the guy who called them out and demanded their resignation was in fact the petty tyrant and had some sort of personal vendetta against them. Although honestly, if you had read the descriptions of what was being alleged and then had the guy, as it says right here, admit that the allegations are true, then I would have a personal vendetta against them for sure. No doubt about it. And the reason, of course, by the way, before I go on, would be because you've just admitted to allegations against you, which are bizarre on top of horrific. So hold on for just a moment till we get there. So yeah, he admitted the allegations were true. Webster said no further investigation was necessary since Stone had confessed to the behavior he was accused of. He added that to the agency's human resources staff, or rather, he added that I was going to say he probably added it to his file, like happened with the other guy we were reading about earlier. But he added that the agency's human resources staff said it was customary to allow employees accused of misconduct to resign in lieu of termination. So, okay, they let him do it. Stone and Hilton resigned on October 17th, 2023. In their brief resignation letters, they gave no reason for their departures. It has been my distinct pleasure to serve the people of Texas, Stone wrote. And that's kind of it for the polite Texas Tribune version of it. The other version of it, again, as mentioned by Robert Downen, this was on May 28th at 10:35 in the morning. He noted, just in, Texas former Solicitor General has left the AG's office amid sex misconduct allegations and a lawsuit outlining his apparent months of detailed disclosure to colleagues. And I'll hang on for just a moment. It says just in, but this was, I guess, I said just in, Texas former Solicitor General has left the AG's office. He did. He left in 2023. Why that's just in? Well, it wasn't that he had left that was just in. It was the nature of the allegations, I guess, had just come in. And here we go. All right. I guess some trigger warnings are in order here. Misconduct allegations and a lawsuit outlining the infractions was what it just had come in here. It outlined what? Months of detailed disclosures to colleagues about his sexual obsession. Hang on to your hats. With watching an asteroid, anally rape the agency's number 2 attorney in front of his kids. What? Like, there's rape fantasies. I don't know. It's a little weird, but I have these rape fantasies. Okay. Bizarre and wrong of you to share them in the workplace. Okay. But they're usually like, well, when you say rape fantasy, you mean you raping somebody? Like one human raping another? No. Oh, it goes beyond that. Let's really not have this discussion. Well, it's an inanimate object. All right. I don't know if I like that better than finding out like you're talking about raping a cow or something, or a cow raping you or someone else. I don't know. Okay. Well, but we're also talking about, a different, than ordinary, let's say, orifice. I don't know what to tell you. And you see this asteroid is what? Like that's, like I said, otherworldly. Like, I don't know. It's almost more, I guess you would have to say almost more normal. At least you're talking about an animal of some kind, human or otherwise, involved in this. No, an asteroid. An asteroid. Wow. The mental issues involved here. What? And of course, in front of the kids, just because, why not? Robert goes on to say, I'm being dead serious. Judge Stone allegedly talked about this asteroid fantasy so often This is got to be a one-off, right? No. Talked about it so often that the agency's number 2 here, Brent Webster, that's the guy, he's a petty tyrant. He talked about it so often that Brent Webster discussed it with him at some point. You have to stop this asteroid thing immediately. And later, fearing for his and his family's safety, consulted with other top officials and the AG's office. And again, now I got to just sort of straighten the story out again. He's sexually harassing Jordan Eskew already with rape fantasies. Not this one, or at least, I don't know, maybe it was this one also. It's not clear to me that he's telling Jordan Eskew, I'm having this fantasy about me or someone else or an asteroid raping you. No, my fantasy is about this asteroid raping Brent. And I just thought you might want to know about that. Is that what happened? It's very difficult to tell. Well, here's a screenshot of this. And this is also difficult to untangle myself. I'll add that note. So here, a screenshot of, I guess, one of the facts alleged in this lawsuit. After Judd was promoted to be Solicitor General, and mind you, that's a very, very super high position in any government. Solicitor General, you're the guy that represents your state or country in front of the Supreme Court regularly. And what are you doing with your time? After Judd was promoted to be Solicitor General, I took Judd to lunch at Lupe Tortilla in North Austin to get to know him a little better. And that makes some sense in terms of, well, I don't know anything about you. I know you're Solicitor General, though. So let's go to lunch. Okay, that seems okay. I wanted to get to know him a little better. I didn't know exactly what was going on in his head. And I learned about Judd's life story. He decided to let me know that he had something. What did he do? I don't know. He had done something which was redacted by the AG's office in this report here. He assured me that he, also redacted by the AG's office, based off the lies in this attached letter he sent, I don't see the attachment, but his past history with women and his pedophilic desire to have my children see me raped by a cylindrical asteroid, I am concerned that Judd is no longer something else redacted by the AG's office and poses a physical threat to me and my family. Well, he sued. And in the meantime, the guy's Solicitor General. For a while anyway, and he should take a leave of office, and he should be added to the defense team for Ken Paxton's impeachment. And guess what? They won. Wow. Texas. I don't know. You have problems. Robert Downen probably also has some things he needs to talk about with people, not because he has a problem, but because he's experienced trauma reading this. He goes on to say, a few follow-ups and clarifications about the timing on some of this, as I deleted a post in my initial thread and now don't see the other posts unless I dig for them. Correction, Judd Stone is not accused of outlining his asteroid rape fantasy over the course of months, as I wrote. Rather, he allegedly disclosed his asteroid rape fantasy in excruciating detail over a long period of time during a meal with federal judges, governor's staff, and NGO workers, which seems like a uniquely bad idea. But no, normally, as someone says here, the correction makes the story less horrifying. Not this time. And he goes on, there's more. I'd normally throw we regret the error on this correction, but that'd be a lie, as regret is a feeling. And at about 45 minutes ago, I am incapable of feeling anything. My initial tweet, he says, also needs to be revised. Judd Stone left the AG's office in 2023 amid all of these allegations, which were just made public as part of the lawsuit. Apologies for that error, as I had just read all the court docs, and my mind was clearly elsewhere, specifically the asteroid belt. I also want to note that while by far the most bizarre, the asteroid thing is just one of numerous disturbing allegations in the lawsuit, and I hope that no one read any of my above posts, which I made in a moment of stunned credulity, as me making light of the broader and more serious claims. Although I don't know what else you can do with it. So anyway, having added to what the Texas Tribune has to say in its more clinical description of what's going on, I just wanted to throw that one in there as flying under the radar because it's a state issue. But I guess the more we hear, the more we learn about the bizarre nature of the Trump administration. And we get to the point where we just say, I just can't believe all these stupid and ridiculous things that we keep hearing about these guys. That keep in mind that there's a whole ass state, Texas, a big ass state down there and operating with not only an ignoramus as its governor signing laws just letting anybody carry guns that's just leading to wholesale shootings and murders in the street, but at the same time represented at the top of its legal system by an attorney general who by all definitions deserved his impeachment and really should never have been acquitted. And it's insane. And now they're stuck with it. They learned nothing, I guess, from the acquittal in the Trump impeachments, multiple, and now have left this guy marauding across the legal landscape of Texas, on top of which he's staffed his office entirely with lunatics and rape fantasists of just, I don't even know, just defy description. And that these guys think they're so untouchable, despite the fact that he was successfully forced out of this office. But now, of course, he's opened up a law firm and he has clients. There are people who hired him to represent them in court. And his idea of, normal lunchtime conversation. Let me tell you about the rape fantasies I harbor about you, your children, other people working at this office. I'm going to discuss them all openly. And if you make me resign, I'm just going to open a law firm. And millions of people are going to pay me millions of dollars. And not millions of people, but hundreds of clients will pay me millions of dollars to represent them in court. This is all out in the open now, and I don't know whether there's been any effect in all of this stuff. But wow, what a Tuesday. I don't know. It wasn't a current events Tuesday per se, but really wild, and I don't know. I feel like we know more than we ever wanted to know about these guys.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Well, what about the current events in the news? Well, there's always Justice Putnam in the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which comes up next right here on Netroots Radio, where he'll update you on the New York City Bar Council is addressing a complaint about top Trump official Emil Bove by kicking it back to Trump's DOJ. That'll solve it. No asteroid in this one, I don't think.